Get started. If there's other people that come in, we'll try to catch them up. But first of all, thank you and welcome, and thanks for coming. This gathering is an opportunity for the Arundel Municipal Building Committee to provide information on the progress of a new town hall. A new town office. Technically, this is our second informational meeting. Admittedly, we did not have a lot of people at the first meeting and decided that we would do a repeat performance, sort of like an encore. So if you were at the first meeting, then you're probably not going to get an awful lot of new information. Prices fluctuate and will continue to fluctuate forever, I guess, by the looks of construction, but the basic ingredients will be the same. I'm Jack Turcott, and I'm the chair of the committee. I told the story, I won't tell it again because you probably already heard it, but we have a power outage. There's a power outage. The story is I did not raise my hand and volunteer to be the chair. It happened somehow, and I haven't quite figured out how. We've been meeting for almost a year or so on a regular basis. You know, every 2 weeks, once in a while, we had a week in between, and we had to honestly admit we started with blank paper. We have a very talented group of people who are on the committee. I'm not one. That's why I'm the chair. See, that's how that all works. I just figured it out. That's exactly how it happened. And I'm not going to read the bios of everybody on the committee because that's what you're not here for, but they are in your packet, and I found it interesting to see the talent and diversity of knowledge that this group has collectively, and we thought we'd share it with you to give you a little bit of an idea who's been sitting down talking about this. I will name them. So that if you don't know everybody, you get a chance. The Arundel Selectmen's Group, Select Persons Group, is the foundation of the committee, all of it. And they are, and I believe they're all here, the current chair, Dan Dubois, Tom Danlick, Jason Netto, who got left off last time I did this, so no way I was going to forget him this time, because I paid a lot for that. Velma Jones and Phil Labby. This is the group that you know well and have, as I said, is the sort of foundation. It was this group that built the committee with volunteers, and Ethan Davis, who is not here or walking in, Jack Reese, who many people know, Joe Simard, who is a technology person that helps us a lot, Rich Fitzmaurice, who is not here tonight, and the vice chair, Robert Ingwerson, who provides a lot of skills to the group. John Bell, who crunches numbers as fast as we give them to him, and runs his own technology department. Steve Dazell, and Steve, honestly, I'm not sure we'd be where we are without him. Steve is and has been the volunteer architect for the project. He put a lot of our thoughts onto that blank paper and turned it into something that we could then hand over. Along with that, our town manager, Keith, and as I said, myself. We also have an architectural firm that has been hired, and they are Port City architect out of Portland, and they'll get a chance to do some talking tonight. Leader being the sort of the chief representative of that group. But as you know, when you hire an architect, you hire a firm, and we're just lucky that Leader's been sort of assigned this particular project. The role of the committee, as described to us, was to help this project from start to finish. And we have different levels of help that we provide, but in general, we're a sounding board, and with the skills that I talked about earlier, we're actually probably developed a little bit more than that into some providing some professional expertise along the way. I guess pretty much that gives us gives you an overall direction. We did develop a mission and vision statement that sounds a little formal, but if you read it, and you'll get a chance to see it on the screen, it's basically fundamental. And it is important to know where you're going and what you stand for. And it's important for us to review it ourselves from time to time, because you can get off track. You have handouts, lots of them. You have a little bit of an agenda for tonight. You have copies of the PowerPoint that's going to be showed and displayed and talked about by different people presenting. This is almost to the end of what I do for tonight, and then the experts basically will be taking over. You have a copy of the bios that I indicated of some of the people. You also have a frequently asked questions sheet that we put together, and that's changing all the time. I see someone with a copy of the progress report. As you know, we've sent out 3 of those so far, and that goes in the mail to every single solitary resident of Arundel. So that information, we hope, has been helpful, and the question and answer portion of that will be ongoing, and will be changing, fluidly from time to time. The picture on the front, nice looking picture. It looks like it's a monster. It really isn't. It's the way the picture was taken, and there's not a lot of background, so it looks like the building's going to be as big as a city structure. And trust me, it is not. It's about an 8,000 square foot building, which is, as some describe it, a big house or a small office. It has a section on it of about 3,000 feet for the meeting room, which actually makes it look a little bit bigger. So with that, we move on to the next person on the agenda, and that's Keith.
Thank you, Jack. My name is Keith Feather, I'm the town manager, and I've been given the task to talk a little bit about the existing building that we have. The building that we presently reside in was built in 1900. It was used for a variety of things. The municipal offices have been there since 1974, so they've been there for 45 years. So the building as it sits hasn't changed much. I know that some of you in the room may have gone to school there years past. And then the school department, from what I understand, was on the second floor for a while. So to say that we've got our money's worth out of that building would certainly be an understatement at this point. Right now, what we've identified is some of the inadequacies, and we'll see some slides on space needs for both the staff and storage. The building sits on an acre, which is shared with the Arundel Fire Rescue Department. The building right now, with that shared space, is about 33 parking spaces. We estimate that we're going to need about 66 parking spaces in order to have a good flow, particularly during voting and those large events that you all have come accustomed to having at the fire station during voting. Obviously, if you're there in the evening, or late dusk evening, you may have the opportunity to, unfortunately, park on the side of Limerick Road to get in to vote, which we think is a real safety problem. In those spaces, particularly, that we have to move all of our equipment out just to vote, seems to be a challenge that in this day and age can be done a different way. Obviously, the building right now doesn't meet current codes. All the bathrooms do not meet ADA standards. There's not an elevator to access or proper stairs to access the upstairs, which has 3 office functions in it. So it becomes very difficult. And the other thing is the energy efficiency of the building. The story I tell is that when I was hired, it's probably just over 3 years ago now, my first winter in the building, I could feel this draft just blowing on my back. And I finally realized that I thought the window was open, and actually it wasn't. So what we did is, in the interim period, we put new windows in the building because everybody in the staff was having the same issue. And we saw a dramatic decrease in our energy usage just by putting the windows in. But clearly, there's a lot of air conditioning and heating problems that we have there. This particular photo shows us the upstairs of the facility as it now is. What you'll see is a long hallway where I'm standing next to. You come down that hallway and you come into what we call the Code Enforcement Office. The Code Enforcement Office is here, and obviously you can see that we've got storage going on in this particular room. We have clutter everywhere. We have a space which is really essentially a meeting space, and since I've been here, we've used it for a couple meetings of the Board of Selectmen, and we had no other place to go. So we've had meetings in this space. And then to my right, there's the room that goes into the tax assessor's office. So if you have to come in and do any business there, and you're going to see the tax assessor, you may have to interrupt the code enforcement officer and get to her office to conduct business with her. So the flow is very inefficient at this particular point. I'll explain these 3 photographs here. So the one to the far left is the Deputy Treasurer's office. The Deputy Treasurer does not have a door on her office. There's no door there because you can't swing it in. You couldn't swing it out because the space is very limited. You'll also see again a lot of clutter in this space. A lot of finishes that are really dated now to the point where the rugs are really starting to get bad. And then the thing that I like to point out is the ceramic heater that's on the floor that she is still utilizing to this day in order to stay warm while she's conducting business for the town. This photograph here is the employee's bathroom, which is right off the main. So if you go in you pay your taxes or register a car, you'll have a large counter there. Right to the right is this bathroom. And the issue that we have here is that this is the server for the town. So the server for the community is left in the bathroom. So it's the only place we have for it. And then this photograph here is our vault, which handles all of our vital records and things that have to be kept forever, as well as other items that we have no other place to put them. So they're in here. You can see that we've tried to manage it the best we can with the racks that we have there, and each person has a place for their own. But what's important about this is that this right here is a dehumidifier, just to keep the vault dry enough so these important records stay in condition that we can use them. That's it. I think that's it for me.
Good evening. My name is Dan DuBois, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the selection process, how we got to where we got, and kind of the partnership that we ended up getting into. So, you know, Keith talked a lot about the deficiencies of the building, and those aren't new, right? Those have been there for a long time. There's been discussions with the selectmen for many, many years on a new town hall. We kind of started that discussion back when, in earnest, when Todd Shea was here. We looked at a whole bunch of properties, and you know, at the time, we had a bunch of options, right? We had some town-owned properties that we looked at, and we had some individually owned properties. The town-owned properties had really, you know, a lot of other areas of deficiencies. Number one, a couple of the pieces that we looked at had, you know, long roads to get in, very expensive, just really didn't make sense for a town to go and spend the money to do that. The other issues was ledge. So, you know, you had to get in there and blast ledge, and then there was the issue of growth. So when I talk about growth, I don't mean that we're gonna build a building and then down the road we're gonna expand the building. We're hoping to be able to build a municipal building that's gonna last, you know, 50 plus years, 50 to 100 years. The growth is, what do you do with a piece of property down the road as the town expands, right? We're getting bigger, there are more people here that are coming to this town, more kids, so there may be an opportunity down the road for, you know, a ball field, a soccer field, maybe a park for the residents to go to, or a nice place to have a good tree lighting ceremony instead of in the middle of a busy road. So the town-owned properties, again, we had ledge issues, and that's very expensive. We had individually owned properties that we looked at, and Keith came on board. We kind of said, okay, look, we want to get this going. We need to get this really moving. So Keith got involved with, you know, talking to some various landowners. We had landowners that came to us and said, hey, we got a piece of property, you know, let's see if we can work out a deal. Some of that property, again, was either too small, or there were strings attached. Like, hey, I got this big piece of land. Tell you what, you build me a road, you know, that goes all the way down to the end over there, and I'll give you this little piece over here to put your town. That just didn't make sense from a town perspective to do that. So the one that kind of stood out was this Limerick Road property. 45 plus acres. We as selectmen looked at that and said, you know, that's huge. I mean, what are we going to do with 45 acres? Let's talk to the landowner. Let's see if we can kind of split that up a little bit. And from the landowner's perspective, you know, he wanted to sell this thing in whole. He would rather not see buildings, you know, residential buildings, but it just didn't make sense for us to pay that money for 45 acres. It was over $300,000, and it just didn't make sense. While that was going on, there was a group of individuals that kind of saw what was happening, and in their mind, they're like, hey, you know, this is a real good opportunity here. They kind of got together, they got with the Kennebunkport Land Trust, and made a proposal to them, and the Kennebunkport Land Trust was on board, and hence they started the Arundel Conservation Trust. That group of folks came to us and said, hey, we got an idea for you. We have a proposal. Here's this large piece of land here. Let's see if we can partner together and buy this thing, preserve a whole bunch of land, maybe make some trails, maybe have access to the trail, get people, you know, parking off the street. We sat together, kind of went through all of that, and you know, last June we voted, and everybody, you know, we approved. We bought the whole piece of property, and then the Conservation Trust bought their piece. So we have a total of 10 acres, and if you go to the next slide, this is just kind of an overhead view. We'll get a little bit more into this down the road, but this is the Limerick Road, right? And this is the Blueberry Place and the not Llama, is it Llama?
Alpacas.
Yeah. They're over here. So this whole piece is what was bought, and this 10-acre spot right here is what was conveyed over to the town. So this offers a great opportunity for the town to be able to preserve some land, be able to take a municipal building, put it off the road, allow a whole bunch of parking to be off the road, and there are a lot of things that we can do here for the town. And in a nutshell, that's kind of how the process worked and how we moved forward. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
No. Good evening, everybody. I should say right at the outset here that I'm not an architect.
Or something like that.
I'm a naval architect. That is, I'm a ship designer as well. I used to be ship and boat designer. But I've done through that side of that career quite a lot of large projects like this, and I know that in the early stages, if there's nothing for people to see, throw darts at, say you idiot, nothing gets done. There's a lot of waving hands and this sort of thing, but nothing actually gets going. I had the software and everything else, so I said to the committee, I'll draw something up. It will be something to tear apart, but at least just give us a direction we can keep moving. And that's, there were several things before that ever happened that are mostly listed here that were forefront in producing anything. The first off, that it had to be as future-proof as possible. That is, we wouldn't have to come back to the town in 10 years, 15, 50 years hopefully, and say, you know what, we got it a bit wrong, it's too small, can we please spend a lot more money, make it grow. Also in that, we wanted it to be as energy efficient as possible, right from the beginning. We're a rural town, rural community, less rural than we used to be, but we'd like to maintain the idea that we're rural rather than urban or suburban, and so the building ought to have some reference to rural buildings, basically farm and barn sort of approach. It should be something the town can be proud of, that people driving past and say, that's a really nice building, that's where we're at. It should be as inexpensive as possible, both to build and to operate. Those are slightly in conflict, maybe, but not terribly badly. And the building should allow for future development, that is, changes in use, decrease in paper, increase in digital, if that ever actually happens. I've heard about the paperless office for the last 40 years, I think. It hasn't got here yet. But the other future development is it should be sited so that we can put in things like as Dan said, a ballpark maybe, a soccer field, a park play area. This town has none of those things, and it would be nice if it did. And the landscaping, at the moment we've got a complete blank canvas. You drive up and down Nimrod Road, it's a field. But such landscaping as we do should be definitely reflect indigenous plants, and it should be responsible for the native wildlife. If we can get indigenous plants that deer won't eat the whole lot in the first spring, that would be good, but we may not achieve that. And that's where we started, and the next thing that we did before anything was drawn up is we did a detailed questionnaire to the town employees, trying to discover who worked with who needed to communicate with who, how the work patterns actually worked, how they foresaw what extra staff might be needed if the town grew by so many %. I think top end we put 50, didn't we? Jack was the biggest. And that came up with a sort of maximum number of staff that the thing was likely to have to deal with. And a lot of useful information about how things actually worked, how the process functioned. And that then led to, I'm not sure what the next one shows. No, look, it's something like this. This is actually the first shot But this is about the second or third of 10, I think, 10 or 12 that actually came up. This was one approach. This was based on the idea that quite a lot of farms in the area, you see the end of the farmhouse, and the farmhouse goes backwards, and then the barn's behind it, sort of thing. And this was a reflection at Limerick, where I would have been here. The first shop was a bit over 10,000 square feet. By this stage, which must have been the third or fourth, we were down to 9,300. And in the interim, we looked at a number of possible options. Would we be better off going to a two-storey building rather than a one-storey building for the offices? Because if you do, you reduce the size of the roof and the foundations, which saves money. But on the other hand, it means a staircase, which is not inexpensive, and more to the point, it would mean an elevator. We'd have to have an elevator for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, and that's an expensive exercise and expensive to maintain. They're a frightening price. And actually, the flow of work and communication wasn't going to be as good. It's one of the problems with the current building, is that the code enforcement, zoning, tax assessors are in one floor and everybody else on the ground floor, and communication isn't wonderful as a result. So we scrapped the idea of a two-storey building. We looked at doing a partial two-storey, that didn't work very well either. This one was actually one of the partial two-storeys, and here's the staircase and the elevator to get to a space over the meeting room. The meeting room, incidentally, we settled on somewhere in the 100 to 120 range seated as a likely sensible size for that space. Go to the next slide. Oh yeah, this is much closer to the one that was on the information sheet, the progress report we had, and it really is. This bit was the offices, this bit is the meeting room, and it's supposed to look like, and it probably does really, a cape with a barn. And actually that aesthetic has been maintained. This was perhaps again too big, and we've shrunk it again since, but it did address all the needs. And it was something similar to this, plus its associated floor plan, that eventually, it was about the 12th iteration, that we passed on to Port City Architects when Lita's crew had been appointed. And this is actually the floor plan for that building. At this stage, we were down to 8,234 square feet, so we'd locked another 1,000 square feet out of it, and lost none of the functionality. Because I'm not an architect, I'm not brilliant at things like the ADA requirements and number of toilets for who you've got to have and all that sort of thing. Professional architects are much better at that. And also, probably in this version, the office sizes were too big. They were rather over generous. And taking those two things has enabled it to be shrunk. Lita has shrunk it another 1,000 square feet. So we're down now to actually, even including a fairly substantial storage area on the second floor, which is what these staircases lead to, we're under 8,000 square feet, which is pretty small. This area here, the meeting room, has all got shrunk because there was some over-ambition in this, I have to say, which is being dealt with. But that's pretty much what went to Port City, and they have worked their magic on that and maintained most of the flow and a lot of the aesthetics. The big difference, which is driven by site considerations, which we really hadn't taken into account, is that it's been mirror imaged, it's been flipped so that the barn is at the north end, which is here, and the offices are at the south end now. That's really easy to do with a computer. And actually, bearing in mind the site configuration, etc., it makes better sense to do that. And actually, we've been back and forth with that a couple of times during the process. So, The other thing you might notice with this drawing, which is also true still, the walls here look pretty thick. They are, because the idea, right from the beginning, is to produce a tight, well-insulated, low-cost building. And the current estimates are that we should be able to heat, light, and ventilate this space for no more and possibly less than the current building, which is just over 2,000 square feet. So that's a bonus. The other thing is it's arranged with a lot of south-facing roof. And so solar panels, photovoltaics, whatever you want to call them, are a real option. In fact, it will take enough current solar panels, and they'll be better by the time this gets built, to power it and the fire rescue building as well. It will produce enough electricity to do that, which is pretty impressive, because particularly with the current legislature in the state, we might be able to sell electricity at a profit. Who knows? Who knows whether that'll still be there in a few years' time. But the fact is, it's going to be an efficient and low-use building, and that's a major part of it. And I don't think there's much more for me to say.
So with your 3D rendering, Steve.
Just want to point out two things for a leader comes up, and one is Steve's very humble, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And you're right, he's not an architect, but I don't know if you caught the fact that he said he designed multi-million-dollar buildings for the Navy for 40 years. I just want to leave that and just say that.
Can I correct that? Jack, it wasn't buildings, it was ships.
The other thing, I tend to always forget somebody, and we do have another presenter tonight that I neglected to mention. Leader is here with Port City Architecture, as I indicated, but she has a partner, now we have a partner, with Dave Wooden. And Dave is with VHB, and don't ask me what that stands for, because I tried to do it once and made a mess of it. But Dave is a landscape site specialist, engineer, architect, and he is the person who is taking care of the site, the land, and designing that portion of it. So they're a team of two, and David will show you some things tonight as well. So Lena.
Basically, just when I came in, the first thing I started to do is I looked at what the square footage was, and this does include the storage that was on the second floor. That's how we got to the 10,400 square feet, and we overlaid it with same amount of rooms, but industry standards, as well as, I take that back, we did do a little editing and manipulating of the bathrooms, but we made sure we met codes. There is a plumbing code that says how many bathrooms are required. And we kind of looked at the storage, like we didn't want to touch the vault. We wanted to make sure it stayed the same square footage, because that doesn't need to change. And we just kind of worked our way through it and brought the square footage down so we can bring the best building for the most economical price. And then, I think that's all. Yeah, sorry. But that's kind of, and we sized as he was talking about with the offices, we sized the offices on comparable city municipal offices of towns your size. So that's how we got that. It's in your packet if you have questions, because I know my eyes don't work this way well up here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to John.
Okay, I get the job of giving you the bad news, which is what this is going to cost. What we'd like to spend a few minutes doing is taking a look at what the construction cost is going to be, what the financing cost is going to be, and then see if we can give you some idea how this will impact the local property taxes. Now, unfortunately, the design process isn't far enough along yet to give you a really exact cost on what the building is gonna be. We have put together a rough estimate, which is between 2.25 million and 2.75 million. This estimate has been developed by committee members, and as Jack mentioned, we do have some pretty knowledgeable people, not me, but who are able to get a pretty good handle on these numbers. We have on the committee architects, building designers, and building contractors. Because of the uncertainty at this point in time of the building costs, we've been looking at a range of estimates from a low of 2.25 million to a high of 2.75 million. Okay? Most of the costs that we've come up with regarding financing have come from the main bond bank. The bonding options that we have include type of payback, the payback period, and the date of issuance. Now, the type of payback would be either a level payment or a level principal plus interest type of payment. The advantages of the level principal payment are that total payback tends to be less over the life of the loan. The disadvantage of the level principal payment is that it costs more in the early years of the loan. So it's a deal where if you are in a position to pay more of the loan down in the early years, it will save money over the life of the bond. The payback period, the bond bank will give us up to 30 years. We've been looking at a payback period of between 20 and 30 years. As far as the date of issuance goes, if the voters in Arundel approve this project, and if our committee stays on schedule, we would like to float this bond in the fall of this year. Okay? The figures that we get from Maine Bond Bank include the interest rate, what the annual debt service will be, what the total amount of payback will be, and what the total interest will be. They do emphasize that these figures are estimates and estimates only, and they can change between now and the time the bond is issued. Under the repayment schedule from the Maine Bond Bank, our first payment would be due in May of 2020. Now, this would be an interest-only payment, and the only reason that I mention it is because the increase in property taxes which would be needed to cover the cost of this bond will come in two phases. The first year, we would see just a minor bump in taxes to cover this interest-only payment. It's in Arundel's fiscal year 20 to 21 that we would have to make our first full payment, which includes interest and principal. So you would see a small increase in taxes next year, assuming this project gets approved and stays on schedule. There would be a more substantial bump in taxes the following year, which is our fiscal year 2021. This chart shows some of the options that we have with the Maine Bond Bank. We show here 3 level debt payment schedules and 3 level principal schedules. So for instance, if you look at the top line, that is a level debt payback over 30 years. The payback in the first year, fiscal year 1920, which is the interest-only payment, would be a little over $49,000. The following year, when we have to make a payment of principal plus interest, that increases to a payback amount of $148,000. The total payback on that level debt over 30 years works out to 4.4 million. Now, from these figures, we can calculate that the change in mill rate for the first year would be 11 cents. Okay? The change in mill rate, or the increase in mill rate for the first year of full payback, which would be fiscal year 20 to 21, would work out to be 33 cents. Now, if you look down the list, you'll notice that the mill rate on each of these items steadily increases as you get down toward the bottom. The bottom example is a level principal payment, and that works out to a mill rate increase in the early years of 45 cents. Now, although that figure is higher during the early years, if you look at the total amount of payback for that last example, it's 3.4 million. The total payback on the first example, which has a much less impact on the mill rate, is 4.4 million. So there's a savings there if we could afford to go with one of the higher priced options in terms of mill rate. There's a big saving on the total payback. The difference between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario is about $1 million. Now, these are figures which would be good for a building costing $2.5 million. The $2.5 million is the mid-range of the 2.25 to 2.75, which the committee has been working with up to this point. The level debt payments will decrease slightly after fiscal year 2021. The level principal payments will also decrease somewhat after fiscal year 2021, but the level principal payments will decrease at a much faster rate than the level debt payments. So this is the type of chart that we need to look at a lot more closely after we've got a concrete figure nailed down for the cost of the building. It's pretty hard to evaluate at this point in time because we have such a spread on our estimate of what the building will cost. Now, to try to put this into the context of what it's going to cost each individual in Arundel, we have a range of property valuations in the left column. If we were to take, for instance, the second one as an example, anybody who owned a $200,000 home in Arundel would see an increase in the first year of payback of $18. That is for the interest-only payment. The second year of payback, there would be an additional increase of $60, so that the total increase on a $200,000 home would be $78, and that increase would be spread over a 2-year period. For anybody who likes to keep track of their expenses on a monthly basis, that works out to $6.50 per month. I would just note again that this is based on a $2.5 million building, which is the midpoint of our estimate. And after fiscal year 2021, the payback amounts will decrease slightly, but it's not by a whole lot. But it will go down a little bit after fiscal year 2021. And I think that's all I have for you, so I'll turn it over to Dave.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
The price of the building here is the project price. It includes the landscaping, the roads, the septic, and all those
Furniture.
bits. Design fees.
Furniture,
fees,
IT.
all, in other words, this is the total package cost. It's not the cost of the 8,000 or so square foot of structure. It's the whole package.
And that leads into something I was gonna add too as well, and I think one of the issues that this committee has been dealing with with these revolving numbers and the unknown and, you know, and what's happening, is that we're going through, and I'll use my term, a very scary time in construction costs right now. And I say scary because if you go out and talk to contractors, they'll tell you, you know, what they're being faced with, and they're looking at 15%, you know, increases from year to year without batting an eye. So perhaps by the time that we get to this project, that will slow down or maybe even drop. But right now, we're faced with build now or it's just gonna get more and more and more expensive. That's a little discouraging to us as we try to take our time to do this right. While we do that, prices are going up. Lena,
Nope, Dave.
Dave.
One quick thing too, John talked a little bit about voter approval. For the record, the June town meeting will not have anything on this in June.
Won't be ready.
We're thinking about maybe something a little bit later, either in the summer or early fall, but there won't be anything at the town meeting concerning this building.
Now Dave,
We good?
now Dave, we got you twice.
We already seen the slide, but, just so, we talk about the property, I'm gonna kind of zoom in on the property a little bit, but Dan kind of went over this. But this is actually where the existing municipal building is, just to kind of give you reference, it's Mountain Road. So the property is basically equidistant, it's about a mile south of the existing town building and about 1.2 miles from Route 1. You know, we've got the Eastern Trail is right here, so there's been some discussions about an easement to be able to access that, so it's, you know, there's some more opportunities for connectivity beyond just having the town property there. Next slide. Oh, back. Oh, I'm missing one.
What happened?
Sorry, Dave.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll add we have a graphic that kind of shows, we've gone out and done a survey of the property, we had surveyors out there, we looked at the topography. There's, basically the site is gradually sloping from about 82 elevation down to about 76 back here, so it's not too bad. There's some wetlands on the property that we need to be aware of and work around. There's an existing well on this property here, so there's actually a 300-foot separation requirement, so the septic for this building will need to be at least 300 feet away from that. We have to keep that in consideration. What else did I have on this? The setbacks are, there's the property zoned urban residential 1, which actually a municipal building is a permitted use. So that's good. It's also needs to be at least an acre, and this is 10 acres. So from a zoning standpoint, you know, everything's in compliance. There's a 50-foot building setback on the front, 25 feet on the sides and in the back, but we kind of zoomed in on the property. There's a stream that's just up here, that there's a 75-foot buffer, so we're trying to stay away from there. And so we kind of jump to the site plan. We're looking to align the driveway with West Lane. This is Limerick Road's a town road, but we're looking at the DOT's guidance on rural roads, and they like to have driveways sort of be across from each other to reduce the amount of conflicts having a lot of driveways. So we're actually coming in and having like a nice sweep down into the property. It's not a straight shot. The parking's tucked behind the building, so it's not really visible from the road. We've also proposing to set the building back. And basically, it's almost double what the setback requirements are, which kind of addresses the rural character that we're trying to maintain. So we're like 100 feet back instead of 50. It's 50-foot setback instead of 25, and this is about 100 feet. So it's, you know, it's an 8,000 square foot building, but when you kind of pull it back from the road like that, it's, you know, I don't think it's that big a building, but it's not really even gonna look like a big building because it's set back. nicely. Again, we have 66 parking spaces. There's a social service part of the building that we might talk about, and we're anticipating that there'll be, you know, a need for some parking, sort of more of a private entrance. This is the main entrance to the building, but employees could be parked here and go in here, leaving this parking for people coming to do business at the town. You know, there's, based on the zoning ordinance with the amount of office space, there's about 20 spaces that are needed to accommodate the staff. So the balance of it's for, you know, when there is a large event that's going on in that community building, there'll be enough parking for everyone. Again, as I said, the property drains from, currently goes from 82 to 76, so what we've done is we're sheet flowing half this parking lot going this way to drain here and halfway here. That's to alleviate having, you know, underground pipes, keep costs down, work with the topography that we've got out there to save costs. Again, there's, you might not be able to see it, but there's a little, we're saving a little spot here for maybe there's a future access to get back into this area for anything like, you know, park or a ball field or whatever might happen in the future. We'd like to be able to plan for that so that it, you know, it's easy to do later. And this is representative of a potential, you know, like a trailhead for the Arundel Conservation Trust. To people could come here and park and, you know, get on a trail and go back to the back 40, so to speak, and ultimately connect over to the Eastern Trail. Looking at having a small plaza space right outside the community room so that there could be some gatherings out there, just, you know, function space, tree lighting, whatever we, you know, could happen out there. I think that's it.
Walk you through the plan. This is the main entrance that was pointing towards the parking lot. We've just rotated it 90 so it's easier to see. This would be the town office. Come right in. The airlock is for just because it's cold in winter. We have a public bathroom here. It will lead into the community space, which has seating. It has storage that will allow for both chair and table storage as well as other things. We have a bathroom here. The idea is that this door can stay open on the weekends, so people who are accessing the trails can actually come in and use the bathroom, versus that lovely porta potty that's usually at the beginning of most trails. We'll come back here. We have a service counter. We have staff space in here. There is space in here for additional staff. We have the vault, which is right here for the stored spaces. We have the deputy treasurer, town manager, a break room. Social services has an entrance from the outside directly that would be secure, but they can let people in, as well as a consulting and a bathroom space. So they have direct access. We have a staff for everybody internally conference room. Here, this is the planning department. We have the storage, we have a counter, we have a computer terminal that people could use to check things in, tax assessor, town planner, code enforcement, and then we put in a small conference room. That's actually something we added to the program. What happens a lot of times when you go in and you're looking at building or doing other things, architects, builders will end up sitting down with one or two staff people and going intently through the plans. And so by putting this in, we could make each of these rooms smaller, and so when they have a meeting, they can use this. So it actually allows these spaces to be a little bit smaller. I think that's the big highlight. Go ahead to the exterior. This is from the parking lot. This is the entrance to the municipal building. This is to the community space. We have solar panels, and you can see them here. On the south side, we wanted to break up the roof. We wanted to have like a farmhouse feel here with the barn attached to it. Go ahead. This is as you come down the drive. This would be the social services entrance. We have direct access here. This is a dormer to allow lighting and a little bit of extra storage space up upstairs. Go ahead. This is what you'd see from the road. You'd see a barn and the windows as we wanted to break up that facade. And this would be kind of from the neighbors. And I think it takes us back to the beginning if you go ahead. And that's what we've got. Questions, I'm sure.
Before we can turn the lights on, before we get into questions, Phil's been looking at me all night because my behavior has been a little off. And I just wanted you to know, some of us are volunteering tonight when we should be home watching the Bruins game. And so we've been, there's a little bit of a secret message out there that 2-0 means, you know, Bruins are ahead. Just so that you know that Phil, but we'll be okay. We're gonna be all right. But anyway, we'd like to allow some time for questions. If you have a question of Lena or Dave or John, go ahead. This is a small group. We can be informal, so you can ask them directly. If it's a generic question, you don't know who to, just ask it, and I'll see if I can, you know, provide you an appropriate person to answer your question. There is, as I said, a list of questions in the handout. One of the things we're going to do is, if you have a question, we're going to use it probably in the next progress report, because if it's your question, it's probably a question of other people as well. So it's informal, relaxed, and what can we do to help you have more information?
That's something you just, it's unforeseen.
Was this helpful? Let me ask a question. Was this helpful?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think you all did a very good job in explaining.
Well, thank you. I wasn't looking for a compliment as much as I was. As much as I was looking for the fact that we gave the information. No, I don't need any more.
You don't wanna make his head any bigger than it is.
Yes.
Yes, just have a question about, and I suppose I could ask my brother Robbie this, he's right next door. But, you talked about looking ahead for growth and thinking about a building that would last, what'd you say, 25, 30 to 50 years?
We actually projected it for more than 50.
So thinking about growth, I'm sure you've done a lot of thinking about this and the actual size the building's gonna end up. Are you, as you as a committee, pretty satisfied about the general size, given how much our town's growing?
That's a terrific question, because we spent a lot of time. I think Steve mentioned earlier, this building was bigger,
Yeah.
square footage when we started, and bigger means more money. So we shrunk and we condensed and we did a lot of that squeezing to get the square footage down for the cost. One of the things, though, that we kept reminding ourselves is don't be penny wise, pound foolish, and again, not come back with an addition. There is some growth space in there. There isn't huge amounts of, well, if we had 10 new people, we'd have 10 new offices, but there is certainly space that can be divided again or petitioned again, and some growth area. The upstairs is an unfinished storage area. Potentially, it could perhaps be developed without a lot of work, but we're satisfied that we've found the right combination. Who knows? I mean, that's a tough question.
They write dissertations on it.
Right, they write dissertations on that.
But we did 3 desks and 1 office extra.
There you go, okay.
Yeah. So, and that, there is, I believe, that's including the buying, or excuse me, I just came out wrong, hiring of 1 new staff immediately. So it is 1 new staff of what's coming. as well as 3 additional desks and 1 additional office. Actually, 4 desks, I take that back, 4 desks. 4 desks and 1 office for in the future.
But again, we're looking 50 plus,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, and I guess I can say this safely, we don't anticipate anything in the very near future, for additional staff, with some modifications to the existing schedules. What else can we help you with?
We hope you're all satisfied with what you saw. There's been a lot of efforts put in by the committee. We're really trying to work hard to use your money wisely. And hopefully when the time comes and we get a final number, we get your support when the time comes to put your hand up.
Who's gonna be having more of these meetings?
They're gonna go to the fire department.
Well, that's an interesting thing. We haven't discussed that quite yet on the committee yet, or what the status of the old building is. It does share the lot with the fire department. It may be one of those things that's just a tear down. That's my thought right off, if you ask me truthfully. But
They
the
can use
committee,
the parking, right?
right, we can use the parking, and in the utility safety tip that we have with CMP with the fire department allows us, or we propose to put 2 additional bays in the future onto the fire station, and use the TIF money to help pay for that. So that would be something in the future that may be proposed as we move down the road, but not right now. It's not right.
Dan, didn't you say it was a non-conforming lot?
It is a non-conforming lot, so there really isn't anything that we could do with that lot. If we were to tear the house down, or, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to, the building needs so much work that we couldn't just fix it standing, right? You'd have to tear it down, and at that point, you know, it's a non-conforming lot, and it makes better sense. as we're looking
It
at
does
now.
scream for a new building.
We need a new
facility
building.
for the town business.
And we will be having future meetings as we get more and more progress. You know, as your circle of friends, you know, talk about it. You know, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, what have you, what you saw here, what you heard. Kind of get the word out, and we'll continue to, you know, on Facebook, at Town Hall, and on our website, when our next meeting comes up. But, you know, we wanna try to get as many people involved in this as we get going, so, you know, please pass the word along.
If the building ever did get torn down, we'd be looking for home for a couple of critters, that, you know, that tend to hang out there.
I think I'm gonna go support the brooms.
I didn't notice that, assuming the sheriff's being moved into this building too?
No.
The deputy?
No, sir.
No.
No, we built an office space for them in the fire department. So that'll actually be a public safety, they have their own access to the rear of the building, they can conduct interviews and that kind of stuff.
Oh, great, yeah.
This is great information because, you know, especially letting everybody know, you know, approximations of, you know, the taxes, how the taxes would be affected. It's been a long time coming. I've lived here for 35 years. My wife has been here, she's been here.
Don't say it, right?
But, you know, this is certainly,
What's that?
you know, you either do it now, or, you know, you wait and it'll be just way too expensive, you know, it's just gonna be worse.
Right.
You certainly are
Nothing goes down.
doable figures, and I'm pretty sure the cost for the schools that we're paying, those are gradually dropping too.
Right, we've already seen in this, the budget proposal will be up, this year that you'll vote on, there is a reduction in those, payments.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to commend all of you, because I just think the building looks really inviting to me, make me proud to live here, and, I like how the Rural Conservation Trust has really partnered on this, so it's gonna be a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Jack?
I'd like to make a couple of comments too about the conservation. Mr. Ingwerson and I are both board members in that group, and the intent is to very actively develop the property, put trails in. In fact, this weekend, there's an effort gonna be out there to clear trails. You're all invited, just bring your chainsaws. The access goes clear through, down across, clear to the eastern trail, and also to the Kennebunk River. And eventually, you'll be able to walk down there or bike down there and sit there and watch the river go by, or ride the trail. We're hoping to move that along very quickly.
Well, good night. Thank you.
Somebody wants to go.
I have a date.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.